For climate resilience planning, it takes various different forms. Some things are official, needed, necessary things that you have to do for federal funding. Others is just, an organization. So for example, for Flower Hill Institute, we were helping them last year develop, their strategy for how they're providing support. They themselves don't have physical infrastructure they're trying to provide, but they're trying to help provide capacity to tribal communities. And so the navigation there is like, as opposed to writing what you would traditionally think is a climate action plan. This is how I'm going to reduce my emissions over time. You're actually looking at how do we actually provide the maximum and most support to the communities that we're serving within it. So it can take different forms within it, but it's basically about trying to figure out how can we be most strategic about the resources that are out there for the best outcomes in the communities that we're trying to provide the services to.
So welcome to 1 Million Cups. It's 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and all over the country, about 200 chapters are having coffee and either have already done Million Cups on the East Coast or getting ready to do it as we are here. And they're making the coffee in California. So welcome. Be sure to check in. If you check in 3 different times, you'll get a pen. 6 different times, you'll get a notebook. So keep coming and you'll get those fabulous prizes. Okay, here's our mission besides giving away pens and notebooks. We're trying to make it easier for entrepreneurs to succeed. Entrepreneurship is a lonely journey for people who don't want to work for the man. And there's a lot of help that those people need, and they don't even know what it is. So coming to a place like this and talking to people who have been there and done that and have all kinds of skills that you didn't even know you needed is the most useful way to assist entrepreneurship. And getting up and helping other people when they get up here, that's also a useful way to learn to improve your entrepreneurship skills. So we're all here to help each other out. And we have education, resources, and connection through the Kauffman Foundation. The way we work toward this is there's a nonprofit foundation, the Kauffman Foundation, that trains our organizers and helps us standardize Million Cups, helps us coach the presenters, and helps us get into the Million Cups mindset. So if you go to another Million Cups instance somewhere in the country, you'll find the format very familiar. So we work toward this with a national and local mission. The national mission is to promote entrepreneurship through the resources that they provide us. We also recognize that every community has its own resources, and every instance of 1 Million Cups strives to take advantage of those. All right, and here's our region. We are told by our regional organizers that we are like one of the top Million Cups in the region. We are indisputably the top Million Cups in New Mexico, and we achieve that by having a low denominator. Okay, here's our pillars. Presentations, not pitches. So to pitch, you're really only interested in one thing, which is extracting money from the rich people that you're talking to. So everything about your company is flawless. You have the perfect team, you've got the perfect product, you've got an IP moat that nobody could wade, all that stuff. All you need is the money. Everybody who's been in a startup knows that the reality is somewhat different from that. You're being asked to do things you don't know how to do all the time. You're having trouble getting people to work for nothing, or equity, which at that stage is nothing. And so you're going to need help. And that's not achieved by seeing how many business cards you can hand out in a minute. It's achieved by seeing the same people over and over again, hearing their stories, they're hearing your stories, you hear other people's stories, and you exchange information. That's the way to make authentic connections instead of just passing out business cards. So we're run for the community, by the community. The organizers are all volunteers. We get a lot out of it. And we're radically and intentionally inclusive. All kinds of people, all kinds of entrepreneurs. Brick and mortar, mom and pop operations, whiteboard companies that might have a few bucks as a grant, all the way up to tentpole companies that drop in every once in a while to show us how it's done. Everybody's welcome here, and everybody's a source of learning. Okay, more about our mission. Please be polite to people. This is an educational environment. There's going to be times when people come up to you and they don't know anything about something you know very well. So please be gentle with them and be educational, and then figure out what they know that you don't know. And if we keep doing that every week, we'll do fine. If you have not presented at Million Cups, you really should. If you have a for-profit business, defined as a business that sells goods or services for more than it costs to produce them, You're welcome to present. We'd prefer that you be in business less than 5 years, or you're undergoing a major pivot if you've been in business more than 5 years. We'll assign you a coach and we'll make you look your best. These are our organizing team. I'm Paul Sauter. This is Lisa Atkins, our host here at Fat Pipe. Eric Rins Whitmore, probably online this morning. Adam is not here today. Sonia is probably online, and Keiko and Oscar are probably making somebody else look good right now. But talk to any of us. Here's our sponsors. Fat Pipe has been our sponsor for what, 8 years? I can't imagine what it would have cost to rent a place to have 1 million cups in if we didn't have this. So bravo to Fat Pipe and Lisa for hosting us. Jason Collin Photography, always making us look good. More Than Organized. Miriam Ortiz-Pino, organizing your stuff, your thoughts, and providing creamer for your coffee. The Foundation for Sustainable Living. Franklin's back there. He provides the coffee. Minuteman Press, putting ink on paper for you. Noventum Custom Software, writing code that works. And Invive Solutions, helping you kick the demon bean with tea and fruit. Thanks for joining us, and I'll hand it back to Lisa.
Thank you. Get the presentation going, and I will introduce our speaker. So this morning we have a repeat presenter. We have Orange Hummingbird. Nikki Mast gave the presentation in 2020 during COVID. She mentioned this morning that she had never been here at Fat Bay BBQ in person. And she has a new partner joining in her business, which also happens to be her husband. Ryan, come on up to the microphone. And let's hear what's happening to Orange Hummingbird over the last 3 years.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate the introduction, and also I want to thank Fat Pipe and thank 1 Million Cups just for the opportunity to come up and present. I've been coming here now for a few months and really enjoyed the environment, really enjoyed the opportunity to sort of connect with other folks who are in similar spaces as me and just sort of troubleshoot kind of where we're at. So I really appreciate the mission of this event and kind of where it goes, and really looking forward to sharing a little bit more about our story and my personal story about this. I also want to thank Eric, who's actually unable to attend today, but he was really helpful in sort of preparing me for today's presentation. So looking forward to sharing on that. So as Lisa mentioned, this is our second presentation. The first one was online a few years ago by my wife, who started the company, Orange Hummingbird. At that time, it was really sort of in response to us relocating out here to New Mexico from New Orleans, where she and I had lived the majority of our adult lives and worked. And so she was getting started. Now we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary, which is pretty awesome for us, because it was something that was just sort of an idea that she had. And now we're in a mode where it's no longer really a startup, but there's stability there. And I would say that the biggest change to that shift was last year when I moved over from my career, or at least the career trajectory I was at, to join. And so now we have a sort of a joint venture there, but she's still the boss and still leading this charge. And we're just excited to continue to see our growth here in New Mexico. Slide. So sort of a repeat of just some of those things, but just an overview, which is, we were founded in July of 2020. So we just celebrated 3 years. At that time, it was just a single member LLC, sort of a boutique consulting firm. My wife has always been active in the entrepreneur community. She was very active in New Orleans throughout her career there. And when she moved out here, this was something that she continued to sort of be in a support role. So she does a lot of operation support for small nonprofits and small businesses. And she'll be able to explain it a lot more eloquently than I do. But in a nutshell, what she likes to do is take the burden of all the background stuff that needs to happen in order for an organization to operate, and let them focus on their growth and running their business. So she does a lot of the back office operations stuff. Last year, we expanded. I left my job in the public sector to join, and we became a multi-member LLC. So now we still sort of focus on boutique consulting, but as we'll get into, sort of a wider range of services that we're providing for that. We have, just because of the nature of our work, we're working with federal contracts. We've submitted now for woman-owned small business status with the SBA, and that has been accepted and is pending. We're hoping to get that actual certification here hopefully in the next month or so. So then that'll be something else that we can add to just the certifications that we offer as a business. And that really helps on the federal side with some of the set aside and non-compete contracts that are out there, just to help out small businesses that are still continuing to grow. One of the things that really looking forward to discussing today, potentially, or one of the areas at least where we're at as businesses, we're still kind of working on our website and marketing materials update. It was kind of set initially for what it was when it was originally founded, but we've kind of been mulling over still how do we rechange or reset what that's going to look like now as a multi-member. But been really busy the last few years, and last year included. Some of the key clients that we've been supporting include here in New Mexico, the Flower Hill Institute, which is a nonprofit located up in Jemez Pueblo, the eviction prevention and diversion program for the state of New Mexico. So providing support for that, which was especially critical in the years of COVID, just to kind of help alleviate some of the burden of folks who were struggling to make rent. Also supporting on the for-profit side, a consulting firm called Coda Holdings, which supports Native communities across Indian country, and then also Sustainability Partners, which is a public service company that provides infrastructure financing and services to public entities, and particularly focusing on the build out here in New Mexico. So the big change, the big shift from last year, and this is my addition and what I'm bringing to it, which is a little bit different than what my wife has always done, but we think that there's a way that this can be complementary, and it certainly works for us. So my background is actually on the public sector. I was a career public servant. I was always working in either federal government or local governments at different capacities within that. The key roles was always in sort of disaster management and recovery resilience space. So some of the main titles and roles that I've had throughout my career include being the primary liaison between the federal agency FEMA and the city of New Orleans during the peak recovery years for Katrina. So that was a pretty significant, as most people are aware, pretty significant recovery event. Still actually going. There's still projects underway right now, but during the peak years where we were really doing a lot of navigation between settlements and project scopes, that was a sort of a pretty significant role for the agency. I went on to work for the city of New Orleans. I was their hazard mitigation administrator, running their risk reduction program at the Office of Homeland Security Emergency Preparedness, and also served as the director of their Resilience and Sustainability Office. So leading a lot of the green infrastructure program and other sort of multi-benefit programs and projects that we had going on throughout the city of New Orleans, which continues to this day. What brought us out to Albuquerque and to New Mexico in 2020 was actually I accepted a position as director of environmental health department for the city of Albuquerque. And so I was leading that agency. I think my timing is, we'll get into, timing is pretty much aligns somehow ironically with the jobs that I've held, but moved out here a month before COVID. And so then went on to help lead the city's response and actions during the pandemic as it pertains to that, which for me was actually, I was kind of well suited. I talked with the mayor about that quite a bit. So I was actually pretty well suited for that. It's my background in emergency management. And so that was a pretty significant role for that. So I kind of call myself a specialist in disaster risk management, resilience and recovery. Folks in my field know a lot about what that means, but for those who are not in there, there's a whole ecosystem around how you prepare for a disaster, and disasters can go anywhere from man-made to natural disasters. And then there's scales within that, but there's a lot of work that goes into all the preparation resilience prior to that. And then in long-term recovery, that's a long-standing and pretty significant effort that usually goes on years after the event actually takes place. And so for places like New Mexico, who now recently have been experiencing some of those larger disasters, this is a pretty significant endeavor that they're going to be working towards over the next several years to recover from that. So that's sort of what I've always been focused on and continue to kind of work on. So I do a lot of work in policy, program, and project development. And usually trying to find ways in which those are complementing each other for maximum benefits within it. And really the current focus of what I'm looking at is the sustainable funding and financing models, and particularly as it pertains to public infrastructure. And there's really kind of, I think, two main drivers that are pushing me that direction. One, I've done a lot of work in the planning space, done a lot of work in the project development space. But there's a big gap between money available and project delivery, right? But connecting those two and figuring out how those can come together to actually turn into a project is actually usually the barrier for a lot of things getting done, particularly in disadvantaged communities and areas that aren't as familiar with how those processes work. So there's just sort of a drive for me personally to kind of work in that to see how we can help affect change there. The other aspect is there's a lot of money out there right now. So there's federal monies that are coming through with these spending packages. There's a lot of private sector funding that's also available. But the reality is those don't turn into projects instantaneously. And so there's a huge need to kind of help communities figure out how you could actually most effectively take advantage of those programs. So that's sort of the push-pull factor of why I'm really focusing on that right now, and particularly where we're bringing that to Orange Hummingbird to try and provide support. On a personal level, sort of how I came to there is kind of like many people, sort of a little bit of a winding path. So I started off I grew up in a very small town, an unincorporated community in Adams County on a farm. We actually called our farm Pickleville Farm, which is the nickname that the area had attained for itself decades ago, because it was just all pickle farms. And so there was a train stop there, but it was because they used to pick up pickles, which I always thought was funny because it's not actually pickles or cucumbers, but it's just easier to say Pickleville than Cucumberville, I guess. From there, I don't think I could have left fast enough, and went on to try and explore the world a little bit. Went to college, and then from there went to the Peace Corps, where I served as an agriculture volunteer and volunteer trainer for a few years down in Guatemala. When I left there, I was fully confident that I was going to lead a career in international development, sustainable development in a sort of international space. So I accepted a position at the Tulane University's Latin American Studies program, and tried to focus on that work. And I moved to New Orleans exactly 5 days before Hurricane Katrina came to raise itself on the shores there, which obviously created a pretty significant diversion where I was headed. So, after a month of being sort of displaced, I moved back, got a job, got to work, waited for things to sort of open back up, finished my program. But naturally, like so many folks in my position at that time, felt a real need to stick around in New Orleans and figure out how to help rebuild. And so that's where my sort of career of not necessarily anticipated, but certainly necessary work in disaster recovery came to be, and sort of built up into those other roles that I played, and was there for 15, 16 years. I met a girl, which is now also my wife and life partner, now my business partner. And so while she was working in the entrepreneur space there, I was working in the government space. And now we've sort of transplanted ourselves out to New Mexico and are still trying to continue that journey. As I mentioned before, I moved here to take a job in the city and anticipated to continue to work there. Sort of as life does sometimes, there's always constant shifts, and we welcomed our second child while we moved out here. So in addition to growing business, my wife was also growing a new human. And so it was pretty significant for her to, she's just an incredible person and what she was able to do. But in reassessing where that is sort of a shift, and it wasn't necessarily a reset so much in my career, but just a realignment of priorities, and sort of where we're at or where I needed to be in terms of what my focus needs to be in providing help, both in a growing business, but then also in a growing family. And so that was really the main driver and sort of why I was deciding to kind of not so much step away from public service, but just so much take a pause and maybe find a new role. So now, as opposed to being in a primary role, I'm in a supporting role. Instead of being leading from the front, I'm sort of leading from the back. But it's a space that I'm certainly just overwhelmingly grateful for every day, to be able to spend so much time with these two little munchkins, Benjamin and Vivian. So that kind of comes to where we're at today. And so we still sort of provide what we call boutique consulting services. Again, the original services were really focused on operations support. So your general bookkeeping, project management, things that are very necessary for any small nonprofit or any business, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to do so. And Nikki's been very successful in building out her client base for that. Much to the support of 1 Million Cups, to be quite honest, in their initial presentation here and the connections that she made here. The added services now that we have is sort of the space that's my specialty, which is on the sustainable funding and financing, And this is particularly for public entities, but doesn't necessarily have to be, like, because there's a whole ecosystem out there that has to work together to create the needed, services and infrastructure that we have. Also still do a little work in disaster risk management, as well as climate resilience planning and support on that, just because it's just so, we just went through the hottest and driest month. Like, I don't think we need to try and convince anybody that this is really happening right now. And then finally, just on the public infrastructure development side, just in the background of, not just working on the planning side, but actually major, multi-million, hundreds of millions of infrastructure projects that I've worked on in my career, trying to drive the needed support to that we have, especially in the face of this sort of once in a lifetime investment that's happening on the public and private sector right now. So, we have these services, they complement each other, I think, quite well. Nikki and I have found that many times we'll talk to a potential client and they'll actually refer them to the other person and be like, well, that sounds great, but you actually might need to use or might benefit from talking to the other person. But we're still trying to answer a couple key questions. And sort of the first one is like, in this space where it's really a small firm, it's boutique, it's growing, we have services that are complementary, but not necessarily directly related. And so if we're going to put out a website, or market materials, like how do we really, what's the best strategies for sort of marketing that? We're still, this is really very much a word of mouth business, but we're setting ourselves up in an area where we don't have, decades of experience like we would have in Louisiana. And so we're still kind of figuring out that and it's sort of the growth phase of the business and how do we actually talk about what we do and what we can offer. And then the other piece is to that, just because we're still relatively new, and if you count that we've been here for 3.5 years, but discount a couple of those for COVID years, we're really kind of just starting out our lives here, right? Like we're still kind of finding our way in New Mexico. There's a lot of places, I can never claim to be born and raised here. There's a lot of places I couldn't even point out on a map still. It's still kind of figuring out an orientation that way. So what are some of the ways to sort of just increase our exposure, maybe for the business, but also just on a personal level? And I count, 1 Million Cups as one of those opportunities that we're grateful to find as a way to kind of do that. But are there other ways that we can do that in a way that's aligns with what we're trying to do as a business and also what we're trying to sort of expose our family to? So, that's the general piece. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to listen to my story a little bit, and certainly would invite Nikki to come up and also help address any questions too, as the leader of this ship. But thank you so much for your time.
We do have a question from Sue Prolazny online, so we'll start with her.
Good morning. Yeah, I was just curious, because you are so into recovery as well as rebuilding infrastructure, do you plan to reach out to the folks up north where we had the tremendous fires and then the resultant flooding?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Since the beginning, actually during even the response phase, I've sort of reached out to different entities that I know, and again, I don't know everyone and I'm not known by everyone, but certainly I reached out to the congressional delegations, some of the local leaders, some of the state folks, just to kind of let them know, hey, listen, I'm available as a resource. I'm not really sure where I could be helpful, but just to make myself available, I will. That continues. And so certainly continue to try and am interested in figuring out how it best be helpful in that sense. I think one of the things that the state is noticing right now, which isn't honestly too surprising for me, but after the fire subsided, there's always ongoing risk now, particularly this type of disaster. But there's billions of dollars in federal recovery funding coming through FEMA that runs through the state. There's a host of other resources that are available for that, but there's a struggle for implementation of that. I think NPR put out an article here about last month, just talking about how less than 1% of that's actually been distributed of those couple $2 billion. That's the norm. That's the norm in disaster recovery. Like it is shocking. It's unfortunate, but that is kind of the norm of the process. And so I think there is a space for us to be helpful there. certainly very interested in helping where we can and engage in those conversations. We did help last year, the Flower Hill Institute. I was able to help them get some funding to do some support for tribal recovery, which was, perhaps less impacted directly on some of their land, but those are sacred sites and areas that they have a lot of, still impacts them economically in their sacred sites and culturally. And so that process with Flower Hill Institute is actually ongoing right now.
Annie,
I
we'll
would
come
just
back to
add,
you.
if I could, if you want to approach the state, I'm recommending you could approach them with a real solution, like the one you just posed for helping them understand the spending of that, billion from federal funding. If you came to them with a solution versus here are my services, I'm not really sure how I could help you, I think they'd listen because they really do need your help.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's certainly, I have ideas on it. I certainly wouldn't claim to have a full solution to anything. And part of the issue is, for me is, not being on the inside there to kind of know, I don't want to create solutions from the outside. It's more of a collaborative process, but I do agree with you that sort of getting involved in forums and where we're actually sort of addressing and troubleshooting those issues is going to be significant, and certainly very interested in looking at that.
We're going to switch back and forth between online. Annie, you'll be up next, but first let's hear from Franklin.
Thank you for coming, making your presentation. I had questions on two of the items that you raised on the right side of the PowerPoint areas that you're entering into now. The sustainable financing and also the climate resilience planning. I'd like to hear more about what those mean to you and how you're implementing.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thank you for that, Franklin. On the sustainable financing, what we're really looking at that is how are you able to create financing strategies that actually align with your ultimate goals, but also that you can sustain that over time, right? It's not one time monies that then you're basically just building stuff that you have to figure out later how to maintain. You have to figure out later how to upgrade to do that. So what we're trying to do is create financing structures that actually self-support not just the repayment of whatever that monies are, but actually the improvement within the community on that. So you're actually creating a more sustainable development aspect outcomes within the folks within the focus of what you're trying to do, as opposed to one-time monies. So there's various ways we can look at that. It really becomes down to be like project specific. You got to kind of look at the details. But I think one of the things that I'm very interested in doing, and we're focused on helping, as much as we can right here in New Mexico, which is the capacity issue behind that. What are those tools? What tools are at your disposal? Because I think, especially on the public entity side, we tend to fall back. If you've never been exposed to anything new, you fall back on what you know. You fall back on your general obligation bonds. You fall back on your revenues, your regular budgeting cycles. Well, over time, what you're doing is you're contributing to a sort of downward spiral of debt, right? Where you actually, if you did accrual accounting as opposed to budgetary accounting, you're actually going to have a much different number within that. And then the other piece there is you're not actually able to advance. You're basically just trying to constantly catch up with your deferred maintenance as opposed to get ahead of the problem on infrastructure. And so what we're trying to do is sort of flip that around and think more forward, and how do we actually develop mechanisms that actually improve over time as opposed to lead to a decreasing or increasing not just debt, but decreasing services. For climate resilience planning, it takes various different forms. Some things are official, needed, necessary things that you have to do for federal funding. Others is just, an organization. So for example, for Flower Hill Institute, we were helping them last year develop, their strategy for how they're providing support. They themselves don't have physical infrastructure they're trying to provide, but they're trying to help provide capacity to tribal communities. And so the navigation there is like, as opposed to writing what you would traditionally think is a climate action plan. This is how I'm going to reduce my emissions over time. You're actually looking at how do we actually provide the maximum and most support to the communities that we're serving within it. So it can take different forms within it, but it's basically about trying to figure out how can we be most strategic about the resources that are out there for the best outcomes in the communities that we're trying to provide the services to.
Great. We have Annie up next.
Thank you.
To piggyback on that last question, Ryan, I'd like to learn more about your sustainability funding strategies and because that was on your service, sustainable funding and financing strategies. I own Eco Verde Community Company, and I'm doing a sustainable development at this point. And of course, one of our greatest challenges in doing a development that's very different from the traditional is the funding and the financing. I have a private funder, but I'd like to hear your take on some of the strategies you might think of, particularly in the creative financing aspect. I mean, I've got some ideas and I'm certainly creative because I'm in the real estate investing space, if you will. So there's financing ideas that I have that I throw out there, whether or not they seem to work or they're at least being thought about. I'd like to take your take on it. Maybe we can meet separately after this meeting at some point and have a kind of one-on-one conversation and maybe an offline conversation that's needed. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's really critical, and thank you for doing the work in that space. There's a lot of tools out there, and I don't think I can kind of go into all of it. I think the keys that I try to look at is sort of risk management, is coming from the disaster management aspect of it. I take that same approach, and it's quite applicable to when you're looking at the financing structures. Is who owns the risk, and how are you going to mitigate that risk over time? And so when you're looking at sustainable financing, you can look at your traditional debt cycles, but you can also look at equity investing into some of these. You can look at ownership risk. You can look at how you're insuring your risk to reduce your borrowing costs. There's various ways to do that. You kind of have to understand. I always try and figure out what's your starting point, where you're trying to get. And then within that, you kind of pick which tools are going to be most successful in getting you there. And a lot of this comes down to when you look at financing or funding in anything, what you're really trying to look at is what's your competitive advantage. I mean, in that sense, businesses are no different than government. You're trying to figure out how are you going to be most competitive at what you're trying to do. It's just that the services that governments have to provide are much broader range, right? They don't get to pick and choose. So there's certain essential services that they have to focus on. And then from there, then you add on, well, what are the other things that you're trying to accomplish within your community? But certainly feel free to reach out. I think I have my contact information available there. And I'd love to set up a time and we can talk through one-on-one how we can support one another.
Right, yeah, I'd like to do that if that's okay with you. I will reach out and we can have a one-on-one conversation at the very
That sounds
least.
great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Hello, Miriam Ortiz-Pino with More Than Organized. Returning to your actual ask about how to connect the two of you, I've had to do the same thing. I run kind of two different businesses that are connected. And so I've been through this in the last few years myself, and it's kind of about finding the overarching vision and mission of what you're trying to do and how they support each other. So I kind of see a bit of operations and a bit of helping strategy in terms of other companies' vision and what they're trying to achieve and how each supports the other and creating a roadmap for them. So if they come to you for strategy first, how the operations can support it, and vice versa, how if they come to you for just something simple and practical, is there a path to a bigger strategy and vision for it? I think that's probably the easiest way to think about it. Also, I'm 13th generation New Mexico, and I might have a few people you could talk to.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. I remember meeting you online in the early days, and you're welcome to New Mexico. I still do the lotion you recommended because my dry skin cannot handle this. So thank you. It's actually really great to be here in person. I've met a lot of your faces online. I will not be, and Orange Hummingbird will not be where we are without the help of 1 Million Cups. So thank you guys so much. It's really special to be back here in person to give this update and this new joint venture marriage of companies of whatnot. I feel like everything we're marrying together these days. So it's really nice to be here and meet all of you wonderful people in person. But thank you, Miriam. We'll definitely keep that in mind when working on the overall picture of the marketing. Thank you.
Next up is Eve online. Eve, can you hear us?
I have trouble. I have a low network. So I was wanting them to contact Las Vegas, New Mexico Chamber of Commerce and start networking. They need help still. That is, I guess, where you'd say the fire was nearest, and they basically have a lot of barracks still that are sitting there. So I'm not sure how many people are living in barracks and housing. A lot of families that had rural farms, their farms burned down. And so I would start there. And so, yeah, thanks. I have a terrible connection at home, but they're working on the road in front of my house today. So thank you.
Hi, Paul Sauter with Equity. So we've talked about this a little bit. So you're a young, hungry company looking for opportunities, and we have a slow-moving disaster, man-made, that is unfolding over decades and is going to take decades to mitigate, which I mean climate change. There's also an amazing opportunity because we have both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which are basically climate bills. So there's a lot of money that's going to come into New Mexico, and people have to apply for it. So Albuquerque, you know, big Albuquerque with a big staff is in a great position to apply for that money. But if you go out to small towns and rural communities and pueblos, they're not. So it seems like they would need your assistance. And I think you should jump on this opportunity and try to meet as many people in those locations as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I felt so comfortable sort of saying, well, I'm going to focus on this. And the reality is on a lot of that, like, it's not just that Albuquerque is going to have a lot of staff that can work on this. They're also going to be able to afford the big consulting firms to do this, right? And I think this is where another area where we actually really align, Nicole and I, which is, you know, we're trying to provide that high quality level of service at a much more lower point of entry, right, for smaller communities. Because I think where you're, you know, the area where I hear what you're talking about a lot is those that most need all the funding are the least likely to actually get it, because there's a process by which you can have access to that. And so if we can help improve their chances of actually being able to, you know, not just be competitive in applying for that funding, but actually once they get the money, actually being able to implement the stuff, right, so that it doesn't have to get returned is a critical way. I mean, there's the noise in between those two of like, hey, I'd love to help. Oh, we really need your help is what we kind of have to figure out. And I think over time and with networks like this is where we're going to have to be, because there's also a situation that, you know, I'm not naive enough to not know this, which is like, how do I build trust with those communities over time that they're actually going to be willing to work with us on that, right? How do they know me? If we're a known entity somewhere else, that's great. But when you're moving and relocating somewhere else, it's like, great. The last person who came in from outside who said that they were going to help me, like, didn't show up the next day. And so there's sort of a natural, just sort of keep showing up aspect to this and keep being able to work your way to build that trust over time, to know that you're building your credibility as long as while you're building those relationships.
I think that would be pretty easy with your background and experience, but I agree, you got to wear them down. It's got to be multiple contacts. Good luck.
Hey, Paul, I need you to sit here for a minute. Phil, you're up next. And then this woman, and then Alan.
All right, Phil Wilson from Executive Outcomes. Couple of things I can suggest for you. And some other people have put this up on the chat as well. Chamber of Commerce would be something that you should get connected with if you want to find out what businesses are in your area and if you can help them. It doesn't cost a lot of money, $300 or $400 for an annual subscription. And you will get also from them a list of events and itineraries they have across the region. They will also set up networking early morning, late evening ones. And all those different events, you can choose which ones you would go to. They also probably will do something like a Chamber of Commerce University where you can do a presentation of your business. So that way you're going to get yourself established locally a lot faster. Sue, who was talking to you also earlier, threw in the chat that you could get connected with the Economic Development Council as well. all right, EDD in Albuquerque. Couple of points from me. Number one, I would suggest you talk to the guy on your left, Paul, about how you do a 1 minute pitch, because you need to do a 1 minute pitch. You have too much detail. It was interesting to hear all your story, but your story is too long for the people that you're prospecting. Okay, so concentrate on what are the key value points of your business? As you said, in answer to another question, what is your competitive advantage? Make it short, sharp, and brief that people understand. But the guy sitting to your left can give you a template that you can work on so you can get that down. And they're my two last points.
Great. Well, really thanks for that advice. I mean, I think those are excellent points. I don't know, Nikki, if we've done much engagement with the Chamber of Commerce at this point, but certainly something we need to look into. And on the pitch side, I mean, I've been attending pitch competitions with this one for my entire career. I am not the entrepreneur. I don't know if it came through my story at all. That is not my strength at all. And so very much learning how to do that aspect of it. I've done lots of presentations in my career, never about me. It's always been about whatever agency I represented. So yeah, being able to accomplish that is going to be certainly something that I need to overcome.
To the complexity of this, Erin Fraser Financials, Nikki is also the head of the ship. Right, what do you think that I couldn't find the meeting because there was a line for the food thing? I don't know what it was. Right, I parked up there.
Okay.
There was a line of people getting food. So disaster recovery is also in Albuquerque, right? The food, the homelessness, right? It's here. So going other places to do it, what do you think about that? Anyway, that's my question. I couldn't even find the place because there's a line of people.
Yeah, it's, thank you. No, there's communities all over the city and here and the world that need help. Which one do you tackle first? Yeah, maybe here, maybe the rural communities of New Mexico. We certainly did our part in Louisiana and New Orleans after Katrina. It's so hard. How do you focus? I'm helping a client, New Mexico eviction and prevention, try to keep people in their homes, try to give landlords the lost funds.
They don't end up there.
So they don't end up there in the lines that need food. Before I was 9 to 5 busy, I was doing a lot of work with Roadrunner Food Bank and just packing, and they had twice a week lines and lines and lines for food. And it's just, you can't pick one. You have to you should pick one and focus your energy there. But it is hard. It is.
So that was my question.
No, it is. And that goes back to marketing too. Like, how do you find us to help? How do you find you guys to help? How do you find the help that you need?
They find it.
And how do they find it?
They don't even know.
That's the storehouse.
Yep.
Is
Yeah,
what you're thinking
right,
of.
right.
It's a food bank.
Right,
They were waiting for it.
right.
Yeah. So it's the age old question. How do you get the marketing out? But yeah, no, it's a very thought provoking question to open up, not just what we're here to do today, but what they're trying to do, what you guys are trying to do. And
We're lucky.
we are very lucky to be here. Yes. In a nice AC room right now. It's very nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, and I think we have Alan online.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of thoughts for you. The first one is to reinforce something that Phil said. And he talked about thinking about the value that you bring. And this goes to your question about how do you frame and market your services. My sense of it is you're marketing from within to without. And I would like you to think about changing that direction to looking at it from the client standpoint and talk to them about what they need that you bring to them. What value do you give to them that they need? The other thing that struck me was you made a couple of statements and you framed it in the negative. You said to someone, I don't know how I can help you, but we can talk about it. And the other thing you said is, I don't have a solution. And I think you can flip that into the positive. The large consulting firms have a prepackaged solution that they want to cram the client's problem into. I once saw an ad for consultants and it said no experience necessary, which I thought was pretty amazing because I was a consultant for many years. That's what I had to sell, was my experience. So just, I don't know your business, but I worked in crisis management for about 25 years. And what I thought I brought to the party was I didn't have a prepackaged solution. What I had was the ability, and I think you have the ability, to walk into a situation and very quickly understand the dynamics that are present. You also bring with you, as you stated, a whole host of tools to which you can apply to those issues. So you turn that into a positive, the fact that you don't have a solution. So you might want to think about framing it as, I will very quickly work with you and we will find a solution to your problem. And it's not prepackaged, it's custom designed for you. Not those words, but essentially to that effect. And you also want to tell them what you said to us. I know that I'm brand new here, and I know you don't know me. And I know that there are people who have shown up and they didn't show up the next day. And I just want to just get an opportunity to show you that I'm not that person, that the person I am is the person who will be here tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Just kind of put that out there to people. And I mean, I'm impressed with what you have. I just think you need to see it a little bit differently and present it a little bit differently so that people can really get a sense of what you truly bring to the party. So wish you all the best.
Well, really, thank you and appreciate those comments. It's that means a lot to me, and really great insight as it pertains to that. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, just hearing you feedback on what I just said is like, well, I'm still a recovering Fed, right? So I'm still always never over promising anything because then it's just, I risk the reputation of somebody beyond myself. But I think working on that and working on that aspect of it, I mean, that sort of genuine sort of approach is the way we're trying to work towards it. And I mean, that's why we're here, right? That's why I was, really looking forward to being able to present, because I'm very much learning this aspect of it and where we kind of fit in.
Hi, Ryan and Nikki. So I have a very interesting question for you. There's been a kind of a disaster going on in New Mexico that a lot of people don't hear about very much, but it's the testing of the nuclear from Trinity and from the storage of nuclear waste. And that's an environmental disaster. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you all can do to participate in helping with that.
Not me. Not my field.
I think when it comes to sort of the risk management aspect of it and what the solutions are moving forward, there's not a specific theme that is sort of, that it's limited to. And so there's always an opportunity, I think, for us to be helpful, just to, if nothing else, how to navigate systems or understand where there's leverage within policy, et cetera, to support that. The thing I would need is I don't know much about that, right? I don't know much about who's doing that, what the problem is, and with whom, we would be helpful for. But all of those kinds of things are areas where we can potentially be helpful for, and to sort of build upon the last comment that you said. And I think we can probably come up with a solution pretty quickly. So.
I just have another quick question. Could you explain a little bit or elaborate on what sustainable investment is? Is that for like a green building or what is that? What do you call that?
Yeah, I mean, so sustainability is another one of those terms I think that have become like resilience. Like, what is actually resilience? Well, it could mean a lot of things. For me, when I think about sustainable finance and sustainable infrastructure, yes, it can include green building, and that's where we're moving towards. But it doesn't have to be, because sometimes the big dumb stuff that you need just to operate, like pipes in the ground, et cetera, there's not really a more sustainable way that that's being done. What you really have to look at is, how do you ensure that whatever you're building isn't going to fall into disrepair, and then you're not going to be able to replace it. So the sustainability aspect there is the sustainability to ensure the services are delivered over time. So it's kind of can mean both, and we kind of look at that and what matters the most for whoever we're working with.
Hi, I'm Clifton Chadwick with Comunicaciones Cocopelli, and thank you, Alan. You're absolutely right. You know, find out what the problem is before you helicopter in with a solution. But it strikes me that you probably have a fairly good idea of who's likely to have the kinds of problems that you can provide solutions to. I work in mass marketing. I can help you significantly increase your reach and exposure in exchange for filthy lucre. But you can also do a lot of foot leather, you know, you call on people. So I have a lot of things crossing my mind. First of all is cultivate testimonials. I think you need to call everybody that you ever did good work with in Louisiana and ask them to say nice things, inserting your names that you can then put on your website. But also I'm specifically thinking of a direct mail postcard that you could then identify these prospects that a lot of people have mentioned who they might be. And then you send them out a mail, and then you have to do all the follow-up calling. You know, there's no, the selling has to happen. But really, if you've done a lot of work and you've got a lot of people that you've worked with who are happy with your work, then write to them all. And among other things, say, here's the way that we're positioning ourselves. Provide feedback to us on that. Consult with them as experts to help you, and you're going to probably get a little better. And then hopefully they'll say nice things. So that's how you share with people all your experience, you know, without having to say, I did it all and I'm pretty cool. And then I think a direct mail campaign like that would be a good start for you. And I am curious, how did you identify your Native American coda and Flower Hill?
That was a 1 Million Cups connection. Mr. Adam Brechtel, I don't think he's here today, but he knows the executive director and made an introduction. They were looking for an operations person, and one thing led to another. So I wish I had him here. I could personally thank him for that. But yeah, so their 1 Million's Cup, that connection was made. So
As Director of Marketing, what do you think about it?
I think it's great. I think we should go back to our friends in Louisiana and our clients and talk to them. Didn't even think about that before. So that's actually a really good suggestion, and get lots of people will give us testimonials.
You know, Louisiana is often compared to New Mexico, so I think that there will be a certain kind of credibility from those testimonials within this state in terms of revenue and rurality and things of that nature.
Poverty. Yeah. That's great.
All right. So we actually have two last questions. I think you know them. Red or green?
Depends on the food, but usually on the side. Christmas on the side.
Yes. One or the other, or both on everything.
And today, what's the one thing this community can do for you?
Well, I think, you know, the opportunity to present today was a big part of that. But, you know, as still somebody who very much feels new, I mean, even though I've been here 3.5 years, you know, I was in a much different role. I have a lot of learning to do. I don't know, you know, about New Mexico, about the different environments, the ecosystems here, about I have a lot of learning to do, even from the entrepreneur community. And so I think fellowship is just sort of the key to that for me right now.
So the chat's chock full of all kinds of good information for you guys. I'll make sure that you get a copy of it. Okay, awesome. Let's give them a round of applause. I do just have, I think, a couple events to share. If the representatives from the city and Activate NM have anything that they want to share, feel free to come up. Any events? Okay. Let's see. And I did capture a few from Eric's email this morning. We have the continuation of Jason Burnett's leadership series. It's going to be August 24th here at Fat Pipe at noon. You can register. You can find the link on our website actually. And this month's theme is powerful check-in tools. So for leaders. And then Eric shared some Santa Fe events. There's a City of Santa Fe OED online, local biz sales and promotions with Marketplace. He sent a link for that. That's also in the newsletter that most of you should have received if you're registered with 1 Million Cups. And responsible innovation meetup, embedding purpose in your marketing. You might have some for Activate. Come on up.
Make sure to hold it correctly. So I'm Lindsay Humphreys, if you haven't met me yet. I'm the senior program manager for Activate, very new, week 4. But we have just confirmed that we are doing our startup fiesta. And our startup fiesta will be on August 29th. And we're featuring, it's not going to be pitch competitions as much, but we're going to be featuring a fireside chat with Pulmeet Singh. If you haven't heard of his name yet, he's he just sold in 2021 for $100 million. He sold the company Twistle. And so we're going to be featuring a little fireside interview with him. And then we will be featuring South Valley Economic Development Center's 3 food vendors as our caterers. So that's on our website at Activate/events. And you guys can go on to there. If you have any other questions, you can maybe reach out to Lisa to get my contact information. And then we have drop-in mentoring on August 18th. If you want to come in one-on-one and just talk with some mentors for some individual mentorship.
You.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you've not yet presented at 1 Million Cups, listen carefully to the people telling you what happened when they presented at 1 Million Cups, right? So when I presented about a month ago, we had potential investors visiting online, and we just signed a term sheet last week. So do your part to lift up entrepreneurship in New Mexico, help out other people, be there with the advice and the information that you have. See you next week.